Ahora damos ya paso a la primera
We now
sesión.
start with the first session. I would like to invite Alberto Cerdán to come here on stage. He's a great colleague of us, a great friend of us.
The director or the representative of EU BIM, that is a congress that is held every year since 6 years ago, and in fact, thanks to him, we had the idea of making the European BIM Summit. So thank you very much, Alberto, for coming here, and it's your time.
Buenos días a todos, bienvenidos.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Well, I would like to thank the organizers for allowing me to be here. I'm not the protagonist here because I'm going to be joined by two very important people for BIM Spain. And as my colleague said, let's see if in this very short time that we have, we managed to give you an overview of the situation of BIM in Spain, because some huge steps have been done here. I would like to thank the organizing committee of this Congress. I would like to thank Ignazi, and also, as it's been already been said, EUBIM has been hosted for 6 years now. It's a meeting point for users and professionals, and that would be quite easy. We have a lot, actually a very good time. And we were the first ones to organize this kind of event, so I'm representing this. Since we've been working for 6 years now, we are now able to have some overview from the very beginning of the BIM. Back then, some of us had already been working with BIM, but now there's more of us. I would like also to thank all the volunteers and all the ones who have been willing to implement these initiatives in companies. Some of these go from the bottom to the top, and others from the top to the bottom. And I'm glad to say that the first applications or initiatives actually were born in these meetings. So, again, some of them are here with us today and are actually part of the organizers. So please, Sergio Muñoz, come here, join me. I'm going to give the floor to you in a few seconds for you to shed some light to the situation of BIM in Spain. As I've said, Sergio is the president or chairman of Building Smart, is the Spanish chapter. It's a non-profit organization. It's a member of the International Building Smart Association, and also works with universities and governments. The main goal of this association is to promote efficiency in the use of BIM, the use of open sources and standards. Sergio's a telecommunications engineer, but he's a very close friend of mine, and I highlight this, and he's been very, very helpful to us from the first Congress we held. Actually, from the very beginning, we trusted him to develop and carry out the BIM in Spain. He specializes in new technologies, and his activity has linked in R&D activities. Currently, he is the co-founder of a startup, Laurentia Technologies, focused on developing new materials based on nanotechnology. So now I give the floor to Sergio, who will talk about the situation of BIM in Spain. And if you have further questions, I'm sure that he will be very happy to help you. Well, thank you very much, Alberto. And thank you also to the organizers to include us, Building Smart, to allow us to explain you what's the standardization currently in Spain? What are the efforts of our Building Smart in Spain and the Spanish chapter at an international level? Our role is increasing and is more and more relevant. And it has already been said, we have been very lucky to organize some annual meetings here, the last one being in Barcelona in the month of April. And I would like to share with you the state of and the situation of BIM in Spain currently. I will try to be quite agile here. I think it had already been said, or we have been talking about hurdles and obstacles, and I think it's quite clear that we have to go past them so that BIM has a greater outreach. And for that, we need a greater BIM demand. A large area of this sector requires this, so we need actually this demand. I'm sure you all know that the European Union published a directive in 2014 on public procurement in order to enhance BIM in public procurement, and the use of BIM is now mandatory in some countries, in the UK and Norway. In Germany will be in 2020, and in Spain, as the ENECO chairman has already mentioned, will be about or by the end of 2018 and 2019. What does this mean, to having an active demand? Well, actually, the need for understanding, because we have seen that BIM, it's about collaboration, it's about participation of all the agents, and all the participants must understand each other. They have to listen to the needs of their fellows, and we have to be able to translate these ideas into a language that is machine readable. And there is where standards come into play. We have to translate these ideas we have. And then that's where we work for at Building Smart. As my colleague said, we are an international non-profit and neutral organization that promotes open standards. So, and that's our commitment. Of course, we are not on our own. We have reached some agreements, collaborations with national BIM programs. We have our own commission and committee here in Spain, but we collaborate with France in the transition plan, also with Germany in planning Bauen. So we actually mobilize people. So how do we work? Or how does our organization work? We try to be a meeting point between users and experts. And what we call rooms or spaces, we have a space for users, client or final end client, end users and final clients, and we have there's different rooms for airports, constructions, regulations, railways and hospitals, and then we have another set of rooms developing standards in different areas. What we do is that we gather twice a year, and from the end user perspective, we have to define what do they want. For instance, clients working in the airport sectors, they say, okay, I want to use BIM for different users such as passenger management, luggage management, and so on. Then we come together and say, okay, let's see what we have. We move on to the experts, and the expert says, okay, I have already defined some standards for that. Let's use them. Or when it comes to the product, experts may say, okay, we don't have the terms or the terminology for airports, but let's include it. And then regarding infrastructures, okay, I can develop some standards that contains the information you need. Let's work together. As I said, we come together, users and experts. They create their own working groups, which lead into different projects that at the same time translate into standards. Well, as I have already said, a month ago, one of these meetings was held here in Barcelona, and usually in these meetings we don't reach 200 users. Actually, we were expecting 200. But we found out that this demand by public clients in terms of standards has increased and boosted the interest, and also has posed us new challenges. So at the end, almost, there were 341 of us from 34 different countries and 146 companies. What did we reach there? Well, actually, 4 different memorandums of understandings were agreed upon: railway, roads, harbours, ports, and common definitions. And I'm sure there's a long way to go, but we are there. We are getting there. In order to reach all the projects that we are generating, the ones that you are seeing here on the slide, the ones already been set up, the ones highlighted in red are a little bit more advanced than the other ones. But for you to have some examples, in the last meeting we passed actually the final standard of the BCF or the Infra IFC alignment. So we are actually accelerating our pace. We are working very hard. And I think that the general feeling in the sector is that we've been working on this for a long time, actually since 1996. And as Luis Fonsi says, and the song says, we are going a little bit slowly, despacito. But that's because of the demand. Why are we accelerating our pace? Well, we have now quite powerful standards. We have building we have very short-term or very demanding short-term goals when talking about bridges, buildings, and so on. And some of these standards have already been implemented. Our companies in Spain their role is more and more important, and companies such as Tipsa, Safir, and so on are already on board. So I think it's quite clear that we are going for standardization. And to wrap up, I would like to say that we, of course, understand that we have to make this demand more active, a demand for standards. We develop such standards and we try to forward them to the leaders of organizations in order to be adopted. But we also try that the software industry uses such standards. At the end of the day, the client wants a product, a good product which is durable and reliable, and that's what the client demands the sector. But what do we find in reality? Well, maybe that we find out that this standardization is lost maybe in between and doesn't reach to the end user. So, therefore, we want to spread the message that when the client adopts these standards, and these standards are integrated at a national level, so that the final client and the sector demand or require the provider the use of such standards. I would like to invite you also to participate in the following summit in October of this year. And, well, we all know that if you want to go fast, go on your own, but if you want to go far, you'd better go together. Thank you very much. Well, as I was saying before, in order for us to have a perspective of BIM in Spain, we must have this overview. The technical summit in Barcelona shed some light on that. But there are other congresses and other events, and we cannot actually go through all of them. because we want to start talking about the action of BIM. We have, in order to talk about that, I think we have here the best person to do it, Mr. Isaac Martin Barbero. He's got degree in law. He's the president and CEO of INECO. He's a state charter economist and trade expert. So thank you very much. Well, among the developments and that we've had, I'm the General Director for International Corporate Development at ICEX, Spain, also in the Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness of Spain. I've been visiting professor in several universities. He specializes in economic intelligence and international participation, public policies and economy. Isaac Martin Barbero. He's the CEO of INECO, and in order to understand BIM Spain, we have to know what INECO is. Actually, it's the company under the umbrella of the construction ministry in Spain. I would like to invite Isaac now to share his perspective of the committee and how BIM is coordinated. Well, I'm going to keep myself very brief because I think the major outlines of what's been done until now I have already mentioned there in my previous speech. But regarding the question posed by Alberto and the initiatives that we are developing, maybe there are some things left to say. If Alberto agrees to that, we have at this committee, we have 3 levels. We have the committee or the commission, which arises from a public and private collaboration, and we gather around 50 organizations that are represented there. These are professional organizations, of course. I can recall some of them, but I'm not going to mention because I don't want to leave anyone out. But I would say that the major ones are there. And some of them have a larger participation, professional associations, and working with an open model, which means that the composition is not closed. We work on technical matters. In each field, we gather the expertise from the professionals, and we generate what we were saying right now, those standards that we must work on. But we also have working groups, something which is very specific to the BIM. So there's people working, spending their time on developing BIM in Spain. Doing this in a very generous manner. But in the last meeting of BIM, I was corrected in this expression, because even though they don't get any money from that, they do have an interest. They actually want things to progress. Okay, we can hear you now. Yes. Maybe you could expand or elaborate on the conclusions of the last BIM meeting and the plan that the ministry is developing. Well, the main conclusion from the last SBIM meeting was actually twofold. The first one being these 8 documents being agreed upon, and the establishment of these milestones, which are actually very ambitious, and every 6 months. And actually, there are so many milestones that I had to write them down. In the following next 6 months, we are going to publish a public procurement guide, which actually translates into words this approach that we agreed upon. Also the execution plan, the user guides, and analysis of interoperability of software. I think this is one of the fundamental topics, and format. IFC. And regarding the second part, just very quickly, our minister announced some weeks after assuming the ministry, announced an innovation plan and an internationalization plan for companies and the whole sector to promote and boost competitiveness of our organizations and companies. This initial commitment has been reinforced recently with a sketch or a draft of this innovation plan that, of course, focuses on people. That's very important. When we talk about innovation, there's always a risk of forgetting about the people and think that this is just for professionals and specialists. But BIM actually places people at the center, at the core of infrastructure in terms of sustainability, as the Chancellor has already said before, to provide a better service for citizens, a better access to data. So, of course, there's a technological part, open data, open information, and an open economy for an open society. This is organized in 4 different axes, digitalization being the first one, that's where basically BIM comes into play, internationalization, intermodality, and intertransformation. And in those 4 horizontal axes, BIM comes under the umbrella of digitalization, being very coherent with the perspective that you just presented. We have to go beyond a complete or a global approach of projects. We don't have to see construction works as projects, but as assets. And we have to facilitate the great investment of our country in infrastructure, taking advantage of the data and the information generated and a better use of this data and information that can be applied to infrastructure and engineering. So that would be a summary of this execution plan of the ministry, and that's actually the role of BIM in this plan. The technical secretary at our meeting announced that in the different working groups for this innovation plan that must be completed by the end of the year, he announced that every year there's going to be a different working group. Well, I still remember in April 2015, where INECO called us for the first time to work on BIM. We created this committee, and then we set this roadmap. And I would like to ask you, which have been the hurdles or the inconvenience you may have encountered from then? Yes, of course. It's great that we ask ourselves about the lessons learned, especially when we talk about an initiative of this caliber. I think that the main hurdle or the main issue is the encompassing of offer and demand, supply and demand, and to make it compatible with the different interests and at the different capacity levels when working with such dynamics. I think that in this regard, we've been lacking a public continuous support, and that at some point, because of the situation, because this reaches out to the whole country, and because the political situation that we have gone through, the changes of responsibles in different areas, maybe we weren't able to keep this flame alive and the spirit, and maybe we have failed in the communication. However, this initiative, personally, I believe it to be exponential, not linear anymore. So maybe when we laid it out in the first place, we were expecting it to advance in a linear way, and maybe it took longer than we expected and wished. But now, without being too optimistic, I think we can say that we are very close to the goals and objectives that we set in the very first place. Of course, we require maximum level of commitment to do that, and the 3 C's I mentioned in my previous intervention are crucial here. As I said, we need to increase demand. We are working on this. We are boosting as much as we can, but it's not also about the demand, also about supply. The time we invest in a good guide for public procurement and tenders, and to set standards that can be easily applied, and to make sure that these standards are useful to our work and that we can rely on them, I'm sure that this time will be very well invested. Well, we are talking about time, and we are actually running out of time, but I wanted to ask, what's the role of the public administration as a booster or as a driver? Yes, I think the answer here is very simple. The administration must be reasonable. We have to be strong, but choosing at the same time the type and the size of projects that allow us somehow to continue our learnings and to learn on the go. A clear instruction. I think that we have actually to act faster, and I announced that already. By the end of this year, there will be some news. And I think that's the only way we have to do this. We have to boost competitiveness in the sector. We have to eliminate hurdles, and actually this enhances opportunity for working together. We have to see if the pace is the right one, and I think the best way to measure our standpoint is through these expert committees and forums and summits. Is it reversible or not? I think we are beyond that, and as it's always the case when new things arrive, some time will be required, of course. Well, we run out of time, so the conclusions of the Congress that we held last week are going to be very short. Is the first one being the corroboration of this interest, and I'm sorry for those who could not attend because we were sold out. It was actually a kind of BIM bang, if you allow me this pun. And the second conclusion will be would be the increase of the number of BIM initiatives related to civil engineering. We were actually at a civil engineering school, so the participants were mostly engineers and architects, and this year we saw a large numbers of presentations in this sector. And well, that will be it for this intervention. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias. Y ahora damos
Thank you very much.
a una sesión en la que se
We
da
now move to our next session,
de cómo se ha puesto en marcha la estrategia
where we will talk how the BIM strategy has been implemented in Catalonia, and we give the floor to Jordi Gonçalves.
Vamos a continuar
We will now continue,
conociendo
and
desde el punto de vista de las administraciones
we will talk about what is being done from the perspective of public administrations in Catalonia. For this reason,
la primera
the first speaker we will have today will be by Ferran Falcó, who is the Secretary of the Territory and Sustainability Secretary of Generalitat de Catalunya, and he's also the President of the Interdepartmental Commission of the Generalitat Government in order to coordinate all the departments that are somehow related to the utilization of BIM. So, Ferran, please. Okay, so do we know how I should work with the computer in order to move the slides? Yes? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. You have been listening already some speeches, so I will try to be, or actually to give quite a short presentation, but bring some data to the table, and I will try not to finish with your patience. I see you are a very patient public. Anyway, I'm Ferran Falcó. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Sustainability and Territory. I'm not a technician myself. I'm the person in charge of the Territory and Sustainability Department that moves all the paperwork. It is true that in the past I actually did some postgraduate studies in real estate operations. However, then we had the real estate bubble bursting, and I could not apply my knowledge. However, that's one of the experiences I had in a very remote past that will accompany me during all my life. Up until now, we've heard some public administration representatives, also some representatives of the Catalan government. Mr. Rull actually explained what we are doing. And what is the reality? Are we actually doing that or not? Maybe many of you think that public administrations say that they are actually doing the work when the person speaking is the official representative, but then they are not doing that. However, I want to affirm, yes, we are working on this, we are doing it, but we are not doing that alone. We cannot do that alone. I think the government is really supporting the utilization of BIM. We want the public administration to be more efficient, and we are very aware that this BIM methodology is just a methodology. If we do not go on a deeper cultural change and we move forward to a new way of working, a more collaborative way of working, where all the stakeholders of the building life cycle take part, we are not really going that far. We won't be achieving our goals. We know that this new methodology requires some technological changes in base data, in databases, in hardware tools, and we also know that this costs money. And currently the Catalan government has the money, but maybe not as much as we would like to. In any case, I am the president of all this, the Interdepartment Commission of BIM. This is the meeting place where all the Catalan government meets to talk about this topic. It was created after agreement in May 2016, and we have the obligation of guiding the implementation of BIM in civil works and public works. We do that more in civil works than in public works. However, we see that this commission needs to analyze the feasibility of implementing the BIM methodology, the possibility of implementing different softwares in the market. We need to study the implementation of a planning project and what are the priorities that need to be implemented first. One of the things that this Interdepartment Commission has done is to order a white paper about this topic, and we have asked the Construim Futur Commission to do that. That is led by the ITEC Foundation. We are actually very proud of ITEC, and from the very first moment when we started talking about BIM, when we got into the government about a couple years ago, we knew that some people were actually working towards that direction with BIM. That's why we went to them to ask to create this white paper about BIM for Catalonia. And what's the purpose of this white paper? We want it to be our guide. We want to be the right guide to implement the BIM methodology. We want to create complicities in this new scenario, and we want to be able to assess and have the necessary resources. Also, this Commission Building the Future has promoted some regulations. We know that as we were not software programmers, we were not technicians, but we knew that we were the key to implement BIM in all our works in Catalonia. If public administration does not modify its own regulations, BIM cannot move forward. For this reason, in the Catalan Parliament, we are working on achieving a new law for the procurement of public works in order that BIM is compulsory for public works. We're also working on drafting an agreement for the tender specification documents. We are also talking about costs in order to give the administration the necessary cost for this technology. We cannot rely the model on the builder. We also need to have this BIM model from the public administration, and we need to create awareness among our professionals so that they know how important this methodology is. It is true that in the tender specification documents, BIM is just stated as an improvement, but our goal is that BIM is not just an improvement, but a prescription, something compulsory. So who belongs to this commission? Well, pretty much everyone in the Catalan government, many of the departments, and also the public sector that actually awards works and contract works. We also have the railway company, the Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat. We also have the Incasol. We have Cimalsa Infraestructuras.cat, which is the flagship company for public works. They do schools, health centers, police stations. We also have the Catalan Water Company. They take care of water and all the equipments. We also have the ICGC and the Telecommunication Center, the CTTI. This commission, Construim Futur, Building the Future, I think it's even more important that the commission I chair, the Interdepartmental Commission, in this Building the Future Commission that was created by ITEC at the beginning of 2015, thanks to a proposal of the CATEP, the Quantity Surveyor and Technical Architects Association. Well, this is where everything is done. We accompany them in their journey, but this is where things are decided, where things are done, and where we are deciding how we can implement the BIM technology and methodology in our country. There are 41 institutions and 3 partners at a personal level. I won't give you the whole list because it's very long, so that we can actually move forward with my presentation. The economic framework, well, we have that 1,200 million were granted from 2011 to 2016, and for 2017, the provision is to have a 700 million euros investment. The first work that we did with BIM was the Public Institute Luis Racasens in Molins de Rei, not far from Barcelona. I like making questions a lot, so I actually made some questions about this project. I asked the cost of the different steps, because one of the totems of BIM is that BIM does not cut deviations if we know how to use it. However, in this first project we went from 4.3 to 4.7 million euros. However, we still trust that the BIM is the best technology. But it also highlights something that is key here. BIM by itself is just a methodology. All the stakeholders involved in a work need to have very clear that everything that needs to be said before, not while we are doing the project. Because then it happens what happens here, that the cost increase. Many times with public works we adapt to the client demands, and that is what it causes, more money. Therefore, it does not invalidate BIM, but we need to make sure that everything that public administration needs to say it when preparing for the construction work. Anyway, in 2014, we introduced the specific clauses in the tender documents regarding BIM, and also our goal is to go beyond these clauses that state BIM is just an improvement, and we want to be able to have BIM as a prescription, as something compulsory, as I was saying earlier. Here we have the transport hub in Plaza España. We also did with BIM the adaptation to disabled people in the station of Puchet. Right now we are working with over 80,000 million euros. Here we have the breakdown of this information for the tender. Ongoing works, for example, we have 50 million euros. Finished works, we have 6.6 million. This is the investment of the Generalitat in BIM. Then we will also have another colleague that will talk about our large BIM project, which is complex of offices. But again, my colleague will talk about it in more detail. In any case, our will is to be more similar to the countries that are leading the way for the BIM technology. We want to be able to have this BIM model implemented in all the dimensions. I won't go in detail about the different dimensions of the BIM methodology. We also want to have training. We are creating awareness sessions for different education stages. We also have some education courses for people working in civil works. We are investing the money there so that people can learn the new methodology. And we are facing a technological and cultural change. We need to adapt to the new work model. We are aware that we need to work in a progressive way towards this change. We need to train and we need to create awareness for our professionals. These are projects typical of smart regions and smart cities. And to me, BIM is circular knowledge. From the very beginning to the end, it's a win-win model. Everyone wins using this. We have seen many times that the construction sector, some want to win. But with BIM, everyone wins. So basically, this shows with words what we try to do with actions. Thank you very much, and I wish you a happy time in Barcelona.
Gracias, Fran Falcó.
Well, thank you, Fran Falcó.
Y ahora vamos a seguir recibiendo
Now
información
we will also have some more information about what is being done by another Catalan government department in a specific project. It's a very special project because of its volume and also because of its importance regarding the administration of all services in the Catalan Generalitat government. We have Isabel Tornabel, who is a subdirector of strategic projects of the General Directorate of Patrimony in the Generalitat de Catalunya, and she will talk about this project. She will explain what this project is about, the volume, and some other details. So, Isabel, you have the floor. Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here to present this project. This is quite an important project for us in many ways. It's an efficiency and transformation project. Efficiency because basically we are concentrating different offices that are spread throughout Barcelona. We had many small offices in different areas in Barcelona, and now we are putting them together in an office complex very nearby to where we are right now. We have this very large complex of offices, and it's also very important because of its relevance. Different departments of public administration will be based there, and right now it's being built. This project started with a public tendering process in order to build this this property, real estates, and Jairo will talk about their perspective of this project. It was awarded to Grupo AXA. We granted them. And the project has two parts. It has a construction stage. We need to build the building. Then the Generalitat will give it to us and we will create the different spaces. And then we have more of an organization part. We need to adapt different offices throughout Barcelona, as I was saying, and we need to put all of them together in the same space. Here you have some images of the renders of how it will look like. And what's the paper of BIM here? What's the role? Well, BIM is something that AXA wants to use for the executive project. And we also want to use BIM as a tool in the whole process. The execution and implementation stage will also be done with BIM. And also the maintenance can be done with BIM. We see this as an opportunity for improvement and for change. And here you can see different things. You can see that the property, the estate is AXA. They designed the project with Pall and Roig. We are doing the work implementation now. Luke will talk about it and will explain how BIM is helping us towards achieving more efficiency. And then AXA will have the use and exploitation of this property during 99 years. We have also the oversight and validation of the project that is done with BIM. We're also doing the oversight of the works with BIM. For the first time, BIM is a requirement. It's not an improvement, just an improvement, but we are demanding that the architecture practice that actually is awarded with this project needs to use BIM. This is how administration is working in two ways. BIM will help us to achieve more efficiency for us as the users, but at the same time we are demanding BIM as a requirement, and that makes us a driving force for the demand in the market so that the different agents and stakeholders need to use BIM and manage the work with BIM. Therefore, the public administration is being a driving force here for BIM. As I was saying, the tender will be public soon. We will demand the use of BIM, and we will also demand to have a BIM manager. I'm reaching the end of my presentation, but I would like to say what this project means for us, for the Generalitat government. We will have a very important and powerful database. We will have some data about consumption indicators and utilization ratios, some information that we didn't have up until now. We'll also be able to have a more efficient and high-performance building. We will need to change our processes. We will need to work in a collaborative manner. We will need some training in order to keep up with its methodology. And as Mr. Rui was saying, we hope that once we use BIM, we never go back. Therefore, we aim to have BIM as a comprehensive tool that we will use in offices implementation from now on and in the future. Now I will give the floor to Bisu from Grupo Alsa, to Ana Albizu. First of all, I would like to thank everyone, and thank you to the organizers for allowing us to talk in this space.
Well, this project was a big challenge for our company, a company that at global level has the strategy to implement BIM in all developing projects. In developing projects in Spain, we use BIM in all of them, and especially this project placed a big challenge because we wanted to use BIM at all levels. Our client, the Catalan government, we proposed them not only to present BIM in the executive process, but during the whole process, and to make BIM a useful tool in order to manage the building. For developing this project, we relied on Heinz, the company Heinz, as a delegate promoter, and Luc Trezer, he's responsible for the implementation of BIM in the development and execution of this building. Well, thank you, Anna, and thank you. From Heinz, what we do is to manage works in the most traditional way for many, many years now. In this project, our aim was to implement and to apply the BIM technology and BIM models in order to improve the traditional processes. So we, as promoters and developers, we lead actually the BIM initiative, and we coordinate with the architecture's office during the tendering of the works, to make the use of BIM as a mandatory requirement for providers. Providers should present structures projects that use and rely on system and management tools based on BIM, and also during the construction, and to have a final project, as my colleague has already explained, with some as-built projects that allow us for a better management of this building. At the end of the day, it's the same process as always, but improving the technology that we have at our disposal. At the beginning of this whole process, we set a number of objectives and goals that at the end of the day pretend to improve, to have better buildings, more efficient buildings, in the benefit of our users, clients, and so on. Some of these goals have been implemented at a further degree during the construction, and others are still under development. I would like to focus on 3 of them. The first one being to improve communication. In this project, there are many stakeholders, and we have to coordinate with each other. We have to exchange information, different companies are participating, and there must be a communication flow among them. Then we have to make this better this project better. We have to optimize the project. And BIM allows us to improve the project using technology. And finally, to coordinate contractors and execution. Again, same as always, to detect mistakes and errors before they happen. And by doing this before on the computer is cheaper than doing that on site. Well, regarding communication, in the first place, we have AXA and us, Heinz, and at our offices, there's different people involved in this project. We have to coordinate, and then we have the central services that help and support us. Then there's the Catalan government, the Generalitat. We have to inform them because they are the final users of the building. And our responsibility is to provide them a good service. Then we have other stakeholders, some of them are here in the room, many companies, many organizations providing quite a lot of information that must be harmonized and coordinated. And finally, there's the role of the BIM manager, who's the person responsible of coordinating this huge amount of information generated by the contractors, the different organizations, and so on, so that the different models are harmonized and can be understood by each other. In order to do that, we apply a set of processes during the construction works, and we work towards a final set of goals. We work towards what we want to be the final result of the BIM application. On our daily life, this translates into a work process, such as in the traditional way of working, we have this BIM process to support tendering, visualization of the project, and so on. Regarding coordination, technology allows us to control the execution, while it's being carried out this week, next week, the timings, how much time do we need to do this and to complete that, to avoid collisions and overlapping, to better coordinate facilities. And at the end of the day, all of this contributes to the optimization of our communication flows. Because one thing is to have, the project in your computer that ultimately translates in this nice, useful and practical building that you see here on the slide, a building that has been based on the work of all the stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention.